working 7 days a week in 24 hours. Yep.
Larry Roberts, welcome to the show. Welcome to Become Your Own Superhero, brother.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. It's been a long time coming, but we're finally making it happen. So this is cool.
We're finally making it. And you're the first person I've ever said brother at the end of welcome to the show. Welcome to Become Your Own Superhero, brother.
Well, I think you're so relaxed right now. I mean, you're chilling there in Mexico. And do you use video? I don't know if you use video on the show or not.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you're chilling with your sport coat on, got no shirt underneath. You're in bro mode right now. So it's all good, man.
Well, your red hat is your amazing branding, right? Everyone knows Larry Roberts from the red hat. Mine is now doing in the pink sports coat, like linen jacket with no shirt. So it's kind of stuck. So I'm kind of like committed to it now.
It's cool. That's how it happens. I didn't mean to do the red hat. I don't even blue's my favorite color, but I'm stuck wearing this red hat for the foreseeable future. So, branding is such an amazing thing because, I was trying to brand myself a certain way when the red hat took over, and it just spontaneously happened. Now I've got bobbleheads. I don't know if you can see the little guy standing, a little blurry in the background, but I've got a bobblehead of me that people have bought. Now people want to buy my bobblehead. I'm like, who wants a bobblehead of Larry Roberts? But
I do.
All came from the red hat. It's insane.
Well, branding's very important in the work that you and I do. And for those who don't know, Larry Roberts has an amazing podcast series. It's in the top, I just checked today, in the top 1.5% of downloads globally. And there's 2.8 million podcasts currently registered globally, and about half of those are in active use. So out of 1.4 million podcasts, you're in the top 1.5%. And those numbers are sketchy. It's probably more than that now, right? Are we close?
It's somewhere in that neighborhood. I don't keep as much of a track on it as I should, or some people. It's up there.
Why I think it's significant, right? And I don't mean to embarrass you, is that people are listening to your podcast. They are engaged, and your listen score, which indicates how long people are listening, or at least that's what I think it does, is really good as well. And it's because you know what you're talking about. And that's part of the reason why I want to bring you on today. But as you know, with Become Your Own Superhero, like everyone's got an origin story, and I'd love to hear how the hell you ended up doing what you're doing, because I'm not going to spoil any of it. I'm just going to let you share.
No, that's great, man. Podcasting was something that I stumbled into. I didn't even, for one, I hated the cast. I thought it was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard of. People were trying to get certain podcasts. I'm like, I don't have time for that. Podcasts are for nerds. I got more important things to do. But back in, here we are. We're recording this on actually Halloween. It's October 31st. So we're only a couple of weeks out from my 9th anniversary of when I actually ended up going into rehab for alcohol.
Congrats,
so it was November. Thank you. I appreciate that. It was November 14th of 2013. And I went in for 7 weeks, went through their program, came out, been sober ever since. But I had been a drunk for years and years leading up to that. So when I got sober, I came out and tried to reacclimate myself to reality. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know where I was going to go or how things were going to pan out. And eventually a coworker talked me into listening to the Joe Rogan podcast. And when I listened to the Joe Rogan podcast, there happened to be 2 comedians on there. It was Tony Hinchcliffe and Joey Diaz. And if you're in the comedy game or you listen to comedy podcasts, you know who these guys are. They're freaking hilarious, but they're not just hilarious. They're hilarious in a way that reminded me. And I just turned 50 this year, so don't tell anybody, but I'm 50. So
happy birthday, bro.
I came out of the 80s, and back in the 80s, we had really unapologetic comedy. It was very brash. It was very bold. And in the comedy world, it's referred to as being blue. Well, these guys, they were using that same type of comedy. I mean, they were dropping F-bombs, and they were saying things that were probably inappropriate and maybe even offensive to certain people. Definitely offensive to certain people. But for me, it was freaking hilarious. I'm like, oh my God, this is just like, I want to say my childhood. And maybe that was my problem, is I grew up on listening to this kind of comedy. But when I heard you could do that on a podcast, I was blown away. And I immediately went out, bought the absolute worst possible microphone you could buy for a podcast. It was a Blue is the name of the company, and they make a snowball. It's called a snowball. It's literally a round ball of a microphone, and it sounds horrible. But I went out and I bought this snowball mic, and I started a podcast with a friend of mine who was an open mic comedian here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And man, that show just took off. It took off on its own. We were getting thousands of downloads with the show. We took it to internet radio. It blew up there as well. We climbed the charts on this one internet radio station that we were on till they shut the station down. That kind of ruined that. But then we took it to a live stage show here in Dallas-Fort Worth. And it quickly became one of the largest open mics for comedians in all of Dallas-Fort Worth outside of a comedy club. So it was a massive hit. The show was amazing. But I also still worked in corporate America at the time. And corporate America didn't care for the content. And they didn't care for the fact that there were people in the office that were wearing my merch to the office. And the name of the show was fun. And can we use profanity on the show at all?
Fuck yes.
Okay, cool. I don't want to be overly offensive, but the name of the show was Accidentally the Whole Tip. And there's a little innuendo there. So people were wearing my hoodie.
Say the name one more time, just in case people didn't hear properly.
Yeah, Accidentally the Whole Tip.
Oh.
Yeah, so instead of just the tip, it was Accidentally the Whole Tip. That was our play. So people were wearing this merch to the office, and it was kind of getting out of hand where we were at. So I had a little closed door session with HR and with management, and while they didn't tell me to kill the show, they highly recommended that I kill the show. So that's what I ended up doing. The open mic continued up until, honestly, the open mic was going up until about 3 weeks ago. So this was started in 2014, and the mic ran up until just a few weeks ago when the venue where we had it, they got shut down because, well, they didn't pay their taxes. So we still were, the tip was still in effect up until just a few weeks ago. And that's kind of sad to see that finally go, but it was a lot of fun. But I had, kind of got my feet wet with podcasting and realized this was something that I love to do. But now I had to do it from a clean perspective. So I started another show called Readily Random, and it was a really horrible name, the worst name. I'm real good at doing things the absolute worst way possible until I learn how to do them right. Just like with the microphone, I bought the worst mic possible. I turned around, started another podcast, named it the worst name possible because nobody knows what the hell that means. It means absolutely nothing. It doesn't tell you what the show is. Your show, you want to be your own superhero? Listen to this show. It's going to tell you how to be your own superhero. Readily Random didn't tell you shit. So I made a massive mistake there in naming the show that, but I was married to the name, and I pushed it and pushed it and pushed it for years. And it slowly evolved. When I started doing it, I just wanted to talk to people that I found interesting. And that's one of the cool things about podcasting is it allows you to do exactly that. I mean, I've talked to people that are actors from Ozark, the hit show on Netflix. I've talked to Super Bowl winners. I've talked to authors. I've talked to, here's a little insight into old Lair. I like origami. Okay, don't tell anybody, but I like origami, folding paper and
Japanese paper
Japanese
folding,
paper folding. Yeah, I'm a big fan. You don't see any of it in the background because it's I keep it on the low. I only talk about it on podcasts. But I was actually able to interview. He's a professor at MIT, and he's also the #1 American origami artist on the planet. So while nobody else gave a shit, I got to talk to the guy, and it was amazing. I got to do it because I had a podcast. So just talking to these different types of people really intrigued me, but it wasn't very effective for growing a show because nobody knew what the hell the show was about. And most of these people, nobody really even cared about. So as I continued learning about podcasting and learning how podcasts work and learning how to establish and build and grow an audience, I started changing the podcast, and it slowly evolved to do an entrepreneur's podcast. And again, as I progressed through learning and growing, the show turned into You're the Boss, which is the name of my current podcast now. So that's a really revised version of my history in podcasting.
Yeah, the Cliff Notes. I'm concerned about the professor. I wonder if focusing on origami is taking away from his ability to lecture effectively.
He's at MIT, so I guess he does a pretty decent job. I don't know.
Or is he just like so smart that he can just execute both? Is he Japanese by any chance?
No, he's American. He's a white dude.
Japanese are going to be pissed.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that they would want to be the best. That and like filleting a tuna or something.
Yeah. But no, he uses a lot of, I mean, he's a mathematics professor, and there is a ton of mathematics into some of these complex folds that they do for some of these origami pieces that they create. And he leverages his math background to come up with some of these very intricate pieces that he folds.
Is there anything about origami that's translated into your recovery? Any metaphors?
It's interesting. I mean, I guess that you could draw that. I can't say that I honestly ever have drawn that. It definitely has helped me over the years focus and find calm and just kind of detach from all of the other negative influences that are out there. I mean, when you're folding a piece and you're trying to create something, you're usually engrossed in that. And it's interesting that you're bringing that up, because podcasting actually did that for me more than anything, but it was the creativity that did it. So I guess there's definitely a parallel there. When you get totally engrossed in something and it becomes your passion, regardless of what it is, that's where your focus tends to go. And that distracts you from everything else. When I was hardcore into my alcoholic haze, that was my passion. That was my focus, was just getting back to where I could get that next drink. And if you look at my life, if I look back at it, even, and I wasn't thinking we were going to go this deep here, but when I start thinking about it, I've always just gotten totally immersed in whatever it is. I have a very addictive personality. Back in my late teens and 20s, heavy into martial arts. All I wanted to do was fight. Fighting was life. And I mean, I did that for years and years and years and years. And even today, I'm still involved as a referee / judge. So my competition days are long gone, but I still have a love for the sport and a love for combat sports. So I think it's just putting yourself into something with that level of passion and that level of interest that spurs that creativity, that drives that focus, that drives that desire. It's kind of interesting to bring that into the fold, though.
Yeah, I resonate a lot of that with a lot of that, Larry, because of the finding better addictions component, right? Like through giving up drink and drugs, and I just celebrated 6 years in August.
Congrats.
Thanks, dude. And although I did do a plant medicine healing ceremony about a month ago, which involved psilocybin and medical grade MDMA, so technically they are very different things, but it's an important distinction that I just want to bring clarity to, I think, so I don't feel like people are being misled.
That's all right. I railed a couple of lines of Coke the other day, but I don't count that. I'm just kidding. Not really. I didn't. I'm just kidding. No.
You've totally thrown me off with that. And it's gone. It's absolutely gone. It can't have been that important. But what I wanted to know earlier was, how bad did it get in the throes of addiction? Because we kind of glossed over it a little bit.
Yeah, it got as bad as it could get, honestly. Let me put it in perspective. It got to the point even before I went into the hospital in July of 2013 for alcohol poisoning. And I was in there for a couple, 3 days while they rehydrated me and got everything situated. And the office, I had some really great relationships in the office where I work, because even though I went to rehab and went through all this addiction and all this horrific stuff, the company that I was with stuck with me. I was there for 21 years. I just left January of last year. So even through all this nonsense, they were there and they were supportive and they were helpful. So July of that year, I went in, like I said, I got to the hospital and I came out, and the vice president, I was in the IT department, or the technical department. And he called me into his office. He goes, "Hey, I know we played this off like you were sick, but we both know what the situation is. So let's just call it what it is." And he goes, "I'm going to tell you right now, if it happens again, you're either going to A, get help, or B, you're going to pack your shit. It's that simple." So that's how it is. So he scared me straight for a little while there, because I offered, I'm like, "Man, I'll come to work every day. I'll do a breathalyzer every day. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll never let it happen again." And I got straight for a couple of months. And then who knows what happened, some stupid excuse to go ahead and grab a bottle on the way home. Probably had a stressful day, long about September of that year. And it just went apeshit from there. And prior to that July, it was to the point already where I would get off work, I would come home, and I kept the gin. Gin was my drink of choice. Kept the gin in the freezer because it's always better cold, right? And I would hit that freezer, pour that first shot, and I would drink the shot while standing over the kitchen sink because I knew it was coming back up. I knew when I did that shot, my body was going to go, fuck you. And I was going to throw it right back up. So that's how bad it was. So I would do that first shot, do another shot immediately after that first one came back up. The second one may come back up. It didn't come up as often, but sometimes the second one would come back up. And then finally that third one, and I would do these in a row, bam, 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 just to get these deets under control and those detox, those shakes, those sweats, that nasty feeling that you get. That was every night. And along after September, it got to the point where I didn't even wait to get home. I would pass out at night, drink till I passed out, wake up 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, drink 3 or 4 more shots till I passed back out, wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, wait till the wife turns on the hairdryer while she's doing her hair, getting ready for work. So she wouldn't hear me get in the freezer. I'd get in the freezer, do 2 or 3, 4 quick shots while she's got the hairdryer going. She wouldn't know about it. Go to work, obviously drunk. Find some reason to go home at lunch because I only lived about 10 minutes from the office. So instead of going to lunch with the guys, now I'm going home for lunch to do whatever, do 3 or 4 more shots. So I'm doing shots all day. And it's just, it's insanity. Then along about November, we'll call it about the first part of November, I just started calling in sick because I was drinking constantly. Because I think at this point I was just like, fuck it, I'm not going to make it through this. So in my own head, I'm pretty confident that I was just slowly committing suicide because I didn't see a way out, didn't know how this was going to work. So I'm just drinking every day. And I remember I was drinking those Special K, they're by Kellogg's breakfast shakes. They come pre-made. And I would try to drink those, but that didn't work out very well with gin. So I don't really know how I was surviving, to be honest with you. And then the last day, November 14th, I had a moment of clarity. And this sounds so cheesy. And this is why I kind of hate telling this part because it just seems so much like just bullshit, but it was true. I'm sitting there. There was 2 movies I kept watching over and over and over again. It sounds so stupid, but one of them was the 1978 Superman with Christopher Reeves. There's a part of, and I only watched part of it. There's a part of the movie at the end where Lois Lane dies and he couldn't get there in time to save her, but he rips her out of the car because she was buried alive in her car. And he's kind of crying because he couldn't save her life. And this is how desperate I kind of felt. This is what I relate this back to. And as he puts her body down, he just looks up at the sky, shakes his head no, and he just lets out this enormous yell, just screams at the top of his lungs, then flies off to try to fix the situation. And that frustration and that yell and that emotion, that yell resonated with me. So I watched this hundreds of times over the last 3 or 4 days of this binge that I was on. And then I also watched The Dark Knight Rises. I'm a big Batman freak. I've got Batman statues and shit all around me. I got a Batman tattoo. I got a picture of me when I was 3 years old before I went into surgery with a Batman t-shirt on. Batman's just always resonated. But in this, I don't know why. But in this Dark Knight Rises, he fights Bane, and Bane breaks the bat. He breaks his, he snaps his back on his leg, and Batman's all broken. And I felt broken at the time too. So I'm sitting here watching these 5 to 7 minute clips of these 2 movies, literally hundreds of times these last 3 days. My wife will not let me watch either movie anymore. They're banned from the house. You cannot watch those movies. But that's what I did. And as I sat there, wallowing in this self-pity and this loss, this feeling of complete loss, I had that moment of clarity. And I just heard that if I didn't get help today, meaning as I sat there right there in that day, in that moment, that tomorrow wasn't going to happen. I wasn't going to see tomorrow. Dude, it was just like a voice. I shit you not. It's just that clear. And I reached out to a friend of mine and I said, Kenny, man, it's time. I need help, bro. I'm about to die. And in the next few moments, a couple of hours went by. Kenny moved into action and grabbed my wife and got the same vice president that pulled me into his office back in July, told him that Larry's reaching out, he needs help. They situated it where I got to go to one of the nicest facilities in Texas, in the country, really. And before you know it, my wife and Kenny, my best friend, they came by, swept me off. They took me to rehab. And when I got there, I don't remember this because they also said when they got to the house, that I refused to leave until I did more shots. So they said I did 5 more shots before I'd let them take me out of the house. Now, how I was even conscious at that point, I have no idea. But I don't remember any of that. But I got to the facility and they were trying to stabilize my vitals and they couldn't. they couldn't get me under control because I was too far gone. So they had to call an ambulance. So an ambulance comes to the rehab facility. Here's the new guy in rehab getting wheeled out on a stretcher. And they took me off back to the hospital where I spent 3 or 4 days there in their recovery wing. And I only remember of that stay, I remember getting out. That's about it. I remember before they would let me go, you know, in most hospitals, they have like 12-inch tiles that tile the entire floor. And when I say the floor of a hospital, I mean like a whole level, like a tier of the hospital. They wouldn't let me go until I could make one lap of the floor of that floor of the hospital. So I can remember walking through the hallways, staring down at the lines where those tiles come together and just telling myself, follow the line, follow the line, follow the line, because I wanted out of there so bad. Nobody ever likes to stay in the hospital, right? So that was my goal. And then they released me back to the rehab facility where I went back. And a lot of this is blurry too. I stayed a week in their recovery wing. Then I stayed a week in sort of a transitionary recovery wing. And then I was supposed to do 4 weeks in basically gen pop, general population there, the rehab facility. But after 6 weeks, I wasn't ready. I remember my wife came and got me at the end of 6 weeks. We went to lunch. She took me because we could never leave the facility or the grounds while I was there. But she came and got me with permission and took me to lunch to kind of reintegrate me into society. And I remember going to lunch and going, I'm not ready for this. This just isn't, it's not in the cards right now. So I went back and I ended up staying another week at the rehab facility. And then after that week, I left and re-entered regular life. And then it was probably a month or so after that before I went back to work. So it was quite the ordeal.
There's another movie you can throw into that. It's bloody Leaving Las Vegas with Nicolas Cage by the sounds of it.
Yeah, definitely. Could have been one of those.
Which for those who haven't seen it is probably, I don't know. I haven't watched it for a long time. Have you watched it recently?
I haven't watched it recently, but ironically enough that you say that, it couldn't have been more than a couple, 3 days ago. I was thumbing through Amazon looking for something to watch while I was laying in bed. And that was one of the suggested titles. I didn't watch it, but I saw it in the thumbnail. I
might rewatch it. It's, I remember it being a very depressing movie, but I watched it years ago, long before I quit drinking. And maybe I want to go back and just reflect on it a little bit. Dude, thank you for sharing. You're a wonderful storyteller. And, you know, sharing that so vulnerably is always going to help people, because my alcoholic rock bottom journey was nothing in comparison to that, right? Like you were nearly fucking dead.
Yeah.
Maybe you were dead. Your wife stayed with you the whole time?
The whole time. And I haven't said much about her, but she drank too. And she drank almost as heavily as I did. She stood right next to me. She would also go through the whole do the shot, throw it back up scenario. But she never woke up in the middle of the night and did shots. She never did shots before work. So she was just a little bit less of an alcoholic. She was still a raging alcoholic. Let's not beat around the bush. But here's the thing, is that she got completely sober on her own while I was gone. And she's been sober ever since as well.
What a woman.
So if you want to talk about an interesting scenario, she did it on her own. I went to a very expensive facility that cost us a ton of cash that we really didn't have. So if you want to talk about some problems in relationships, can you imagine the names that she called me after I got home when she was strong enough to do it on her own and I had to go to some shitty ass facility to get sober? I mean, there was a definite power dynamic there that was an interesting shift. And my wife, she's brutal. She's 4 foot nothing and weighs about 95 pounds on a wet day. But she's ruthless, man. She doesn't pull any punches, but she's super, super strong. And, you know, we kind of look back on it because I don't go to meetings and I don't by any means detract from anybody that does. If that's your way of staying sober, please, by all means, continue along that path. For me personally, I've never gone to meetings after the fact. I've never gone to support groups after the fact. I did continue going to a doctor because I was on medication for years after the fact because I'd done so much damage to my body that I actually ended up walking with a cane for over a year and a half because my joints, the nerve damage that I had done with so much alcohol intake destroyed my nerve endings. And I was literally on fire like all of the time. And that's even how I ended up in the hospital back in that first time in July of 2013 is we had to call an ambulance because my body was literally like on fire. It would not stop burning. And that's why we ended up calling the ambulance. And it was because of the alcohol poisoning that happened. But that same experience, even after getting sober, stayed with me for years and years and years and years. And I was on medication up until January of last year. I finally took myself off of everything. So
Congrats, dude. Congrats.
yeah, thank you. There was some stuff there that I wasn't sure if I could get off of while I was still in corporate America. And I didn't want to risk it. You know what I mean? I didn't want to, because some of it was mood enhancing and blah, blah, blah. A lot of it was pain management, but I was kind of scared to do it in that environment. So when I left my corporate position to do podcasting and podcast producing full time in January of last year, I said, man, I'm going straight and narrow here too. So I got off all that medication, stopped seeing that doctor, and also shed 100 pounds over the last year and a half.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's been quite the transition. But again, I didn't go to any meetings or anything along those lines, and still don't. But if you need to, please, by all means, go out and find a meeting and get the help that works for you. But again, my wife she powered through it all. So we look back and wonder if that separation and breaking the habits of the drinking was one of the biggest components in getting sober. I don't know, but hats off to her for sure for being as strong as she is. But we're still together. We've been together 21 years, so I have a ton of respect for her.
Oh, hell yeah. I've met her. I've got a ton of respect for her too. I think maybe she had a woman's intuition. Women are very smart. I've come to learn this in latter years of my life, right?
Yeah.
I think that maybe she knew that if she didn't get clean, that you were no chance of staying sober if you were going to be together. So it was either you guys were done or it was just going to relapse and you would have died the next time. So she was like, I had Anna and I were on the road in the States for the last 3 months, and my wife actually shared some real vulnerable stuff of a fight that we had in the car maybe a couple of months ago. And we did 2,000 miles in 6 days. And I would not recommend that, by the way. And we weren't exercising either because we're in the car the whole time. And we had this fight, and basically it was over nothing in hindsight, but it involved a crescendo with me. We're in the middle of Kansas, middle of nowhere, right? Like state of Kansas. And we had this fight, and basically Anna took her wedding ring off and threw it into the cup holder in the car and demanded to be driven to the airport to fly back to Mexico, right? And Kansas City airport was 2-hour drive from where we had the fight. Needed some more gas. We pulled into the gas station. She is in tears. She goes to the bathroom. And I fill up the car and I get back in the car and my phone rings and it's Les Brown. And Les him and I have become good friends. He came on my podcast, episode 10, when I had 10 subscribers in 2020. Ended up writing the foreword for my book, and he's involved in this mastermind that I'm in. And it's a hero of mine that I've been able to connect with. But I don't get regular phone calls from him. I don't want to paint this picture, right? We speak relatively frequently, but it was very bizarre to get this call. And he wanted to talk to me about something, but he asked me, like he always does, Laban, are you okay? And I said, honestly, Les, no, I'm not. And I told him what happened. And he said, are you coachable? And I'm like, yes, Les, I am. And for those who don't know, Les is largely regarded as one of the greatest motivational speakers of all time, right? He's 77, twice survived prostate cancer. He used to be married to Gladys Knight from The Temptations. He's just an OG, right? And he said, Laban, in moments like this, one of you needs to take a stand for the relationship. You need to take a stand for the relationship so that it prevents both of you from making rash, outrageous, irreparable decisions. And sometimes when you might say things that you cannot ever take back. And then my wife came back to the car and I said, Les is on the phone. And he reiterated the same thing to Anna. And we had about 10 minutes of this life-changing phone call, which was just a godsend for us. And I got out of the car, Larry, and went and embraced Anna, and I apologized and I meant it, and she apologized to me, and I And as I grabbed her, I looked behind her as you would when you're naturally hugging someone. And there was this billboard in the middle of nowhere. This middle of nowhere. We're in the middle of like the cornfields of Kansas. And it has never quit. And I took a photograph of this thing, right? Never quit. And the reason I wanted to share that was that it sounds to me that your wife took a stand for the relationship. And as a result, your lives have infinitely improved forever.
100%. 100%. I can't disagree with that at all. She definitely did. And our lives definitely improved. I don't know how many times over, but it's the relationship completely changed. It was more joyful. It was more calm. It's been more idyllic. I mean, it's almost like a Norman Rockwell picture. I mean, it's like, and there's been times over the last several years where we look at each other and go, was it supposed to be like this? Is it supposed to be this easy? Because yeah, it just is. We have two dogs and our house and everything's peachy. At least it was until I left my job and did podcasting full time. Hadn't been quite as peachy since, but overall, overall it's still pretty peachy.
Well, let's talk about this because I just brought up a great point about the power of podcasting. You touched on it early on, Larry. There's no way that I would have received that phone call and many others of that ilk over the course of the last year if I didn't have a podcast. So maybe a great question to ask you is, why is having a podcast so important?
Because it's your opportunity to establish your personal brand, establish your business brand, establish your story, establish your message, and reach people and connect with people that you would never have the opportunity to do so otherwise. There's a lot of power in the spoken word, and we have an opportunity with a podcast to speak whatever word that is, whatever your message is. And there's not a platform out there that really allows for that anymore. You can talk about YouTube, you can talk about other platforms, but even that is it's not necessarily your platform. And I mean, we've seen that. We've seen people get deplatformed. We've seen people be silenced. And yeah, I'm not taking one side or the other. I'm just saying that podcasting, it's yours. It's open. It's you. It's your opportunity, and it's one of the most powerful opportunities that's available to us right now.
So what advice would you have for people listening to this? And, I've been wanting to do this for a long time now. This is a sign from God. Larry's preaching, he's channeling, God. Where do I start?
You start by just hitting record. You hear that a lot. And in all honesty, a lot of times I will coach somebody to not quite hit record just yet. I'm a big advocate of podcasting with a plan and a purpose. So the first thing I would recommend you do is understand why you want to have a podcast. Why do you want to leverage this platform? What are your goals for your podcast? Some people want a podcast just because they want to talk. Musicians, sometimes they just create music because they want to play music. They don't care if anybody ever hears it. So some people will create a podcast for the same way. If somebody hears it, great. But if they don't, hey, that's great too. I'm just having a good time, maybe with my best friend as a co-host or something along those lines. And that's awesome. But so many times people will start a podcast without a plan, without a purpose, but yet they still have expectations. And a lot of times those expectations they're not realistic. I like to call them Joe Rogan delusions of grandeur. People think they're going to start this podcast and they're going to be the next JRE. And I don't want to bust any bubbles, but that's just not going to happen ever. It's not going to happen. So if you understand why you're starting this podcast, if you understand what you want to accomplish with this podcast, your expectations can be set accordingly. And then you can go through the creation process and just have fun and strive and work towards those goals without having these unrealistic expectations and then being let down. Most podcasts don't make it past episode 7. Most people pod fade. That's the terminology. They fade out from wanting to do the show because after episode 7, they think they should be a superstar. And that's just not quite how it works. So knowing why you want the podcast, knowing what your goals are, that'll allow you to balance out those expectations and continue through the creative process.
Yeah, great advice. And mine started in, let's call it April 2020, right? And it took me until 6 months ago to hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. I think Joe Rogan had been going for, I'm going to say, at least a decade before it really started getting popular in maybe 2017, 2018, maybe.
Yep. Yep.
And then, oh, he sells it for $100 million. That's like, 13, 14 years of grind. And he was doing multiple episodes a week. I think he's done multiple thousand episodes from memory.
Yeah, yeah. And keep in mind too, Joe Rogan, he's had a television career. Joe Rogan is one of the top comedians on the planet. He sells out stadiums. He doesn't sell out bars. He doesn't sell out comedy clubs. He sells out stadiums, 30, 40, 50,000 seat stadiums, and he sells those out. So to think that the podcast is going to turn around and do Joe Rogan millions and millions of downloads type numbers, it's just not a realistic expectation. Right now, the average downloads for a podcast is somewhere around 35 downloads per episode. So if you're doing 50 downloads, if you're doing 100 downloads, you're crushing it. You're doing a great job. That's amazing. Keep doing it. Because right now, especially as we sit here in 2022, I don't want to say post-COVID, but we're at the tail end of this whole COVID thing. I don't know how many podcasts started during 2021, but there were a shit ton.
All of them.
Yeah, all of them. Yeah. So you were alluding to the numbers earlier. Well over 1 million, 1.5 million podcasts started last year. And well over 1 million, 1.5 million podcasts have died in the last year. And it's because people were doing it just to have something to do. Now, if you're doing it for something to do, just, again, keep your expectations in check. Expect that people are going to respond in a way that you're doing something just to have something to do. They're not going to respond by wanting to download each and every episode and subscribe to your show at the drop of a hat. So that's my biggest concern for people is they start and they have those expectations and they just don't get met.
Yeah, well, I think I heard a great analogy. It's like if you had a room full of 35, 40 people listening to you speak for an hour.
Yeah.
Like that's a huge thing. It's 35 people giving their time. I know it's not all together, but just think about that. And a number of the people that I interview, Larry, of late, talking about subjects that are controversial on it. And it's been very disheartening where YouTube in particular has been removing videos from certain guests and that type of thing. And I feel like some of the other platforms the numbers have gone down as well. How would you mitigate that scenario?
With a podcast, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, one is you have your own platform. With a podcast, you can put it on your own website if you want to. I mean, everything is driven by what they call an RSS feed, which RSS stands for really simple syndication. And it's nothing more than a URL. And there's tons of plugins for a variety of different types of websites out there, whether it's WordPress or Wix or any of the other sites that are out there. And you have the opportunity to host your media right there on your own site if it comes down to it. So the odds of being silenced permanently are pretty remote with a podcast because you control the platform, you control the content, you control everything about it if you want to. Now, most podcasts have a podcast host. There's a ton of them out there, from Blueberry to Libsyn to Buzzsprout and so many others out there.
Captivate and whatever else.
Yeah, exactly. Captivate's another great one. So if they control your content, then yeah, they can kind of silence you. But even if you get shut down from the host, you can host it yourself. So if you really want a podcast and you really, regardless of what the message is, and I'm not saying I support all messages by any means, I'm just saying that I support the freedom to have that conversation that you want to have. And a podcast right now is really the only thing that will allow you to do that. Yeah,
that's great advice. Something I hadn't really thought about. I've always relied on I've been using Buzzsprout for a long time. And it's very clever technology. It distributes the podcast onto 30 or 40 different platforms, right? Mm-hmm. But I had an experience recently where I saved a video to YouTube under private of an interview that I did that was never going to see the light of day on YouTube, because they kind of saved them there as a backup. Yeah. And then YouTube sent me this thing saying, we've deleted the video for medical misinformation. And I'm like, and I appealed it. And I was like, what are you doing watching my private videos, and then they rejected the appeal and fled anyway. So, and I only share this is just to give people the heads up. Like, this is the extent. And I know YouTube have just implemented something where they are going to be verifying approved medical experts and boosting their algorithms for people that fall into line with the World Health Organization and all this other stuff.
Yep.
And so if you are like I am and you love just seeking the truth, right? Freedom of speech is paramount. Then heeding Larry's advice is going to be a great place to start. So maybe if you are going to start, you want to build a website, or you want to have a website built for pretty cheap and then put in the RSS feed from there.
Yeah, 100%. You can do that. There's plugins where you can just plug the RSS feed directly in there, or you can actually host the content on your own servers. So that gets to be a bit more complex and a bit more technically inclined, but it's still something that you can do, and it's not that difficult.
And how do you help people specifically, Larry, with the work you do?
Yeah, I tend to work with brands, businesses, and organizations, and we build podcasts once again with a plan and a purpose. So typically, if you become a client of mine, we'll work together to write out a very, very thorough description of the podcast. You know, Apple Podcasts allows you up to 4,000 characters for your description. Now, that's not words, it's characters, but that still works out to be about 1.5 to 2 pages worth of copy for the description of your podcast. And while most people aren't going to read 4,000 characters for the description of a podcast, what that exercise does, it helps provide us and a potential listener with clarity of what the show is about. And we take that description after we write it, and we maintain consistency throughout all aspects of the show, whether it be the description, the title, the intro, the outro, the messaging, the unique listening proposition. Everything that we put together comes out of that description. So that's what I talk about when I say with a plan and a purpose. We work that into the description, and we know as we work together what your goals are, what we're trying to achieve, and we can put a plan in place to help make that happen.
That's awesome, Larry. And how do people get a hold of you, brother?
The best way right now, man, I got to be honest, I'm driving my IG. I want to be that IG guy. So the Larry Roberts on Instagram. That's where I want everybody to find me. Head over to the Larry Roberts on IG. Send me a direct message, and I'm more than happy to help you any way that I can.
It's like, how do people find you, Laban? Well, Linktree. Just go to Linktree, bitch, and pick one of the 50 different ways that I'm trying to stay on top of all this stuff. And then I get deplatformed with this one, and I got to go to Rumble. And it's like, I've often thought about just burning it all down. You know, the end scene on Fight Club.
Yes.
Burning all, and like rereading that book, Be So Good They Can't Ignore You, just and do it enough to where like I'm just a household name without any social media.
Man, I'll tell you, I've been on tour for probably the last 14 months, just touring the country, talking about podcasting. And my brand has grown exponentially beyond what my social media numbers would reflect. You know, I mean, I'm pretty decent sized on Facebook. My IG's, I don't know, 2,100 or something. My Twitter's 2,300 or something. My LinkedIn's 15, whatever. You know, I've got all these moderate numbers on all of the platforms, and they don't really do anything for me. But just the fact that I've toured, and next Friday I'm getting on a plane. I head to Denver next Friday for a speaking gig there. I leave Denver, go to Santa Ana, California. I got a speaking gig out there. Then back in Dallas for a speaking gig that just happens to be here, and luckily I live here as well. So it's getting out there and getting involved in the community, getting involved in the people, and just shaking hands and essentially kissing babies, just playing the political thing, man, has done tremendous things for me and my personal brand that far exceeds social media. And it even, when I get back home, I'm like, man, do I even need to do social media? I know I do, but it's still, you know, it's just like, yeah, become so popular and become so in demand that they can't deny you.
I love that. Great advice. Do you have any concluding thoughts for our audience today, Larry?
You know, we've covered so many different topics today, and you know, I kind of want to just lean back into the sobriety thing. So many of us struggle at times to be our own superhero, and sometimes just making that decision to make whatever change we need to make in our life, even if it's not sobriety. We all have our demons that we're fighting, and we all need to make that decision at some point in time to defeat those demons, be our own superheroes, and move forward in the life that we're supposed to have. And that can be very difficult. And even after you do that, the path can be very difficult. I mean, it took me 7 years just to become pain-free, just to become really mobile again. So yeah, it's not going to be easy. It's a long road, but you have to take that first step. And I just want to challenge anybody out there that's fighting their own demons to go ahead and do that. Take that first step and make the change that you need to make to live the life that you deserve to live.
Fantastic, Larry. Get around him on Instagram. Ladies and gentlemen, Larry Roberts.
I got superpowers, working 7 days a week and 24 hours. Yup, I got the business saying this boy sure is up to something. Why don't you come and listen? Just don't hit the power button. They say I'm crazy when I say I got the superpowers.